Hello dear viewers, you are watching Ruslan Belov's channel, and this time we will analyze the situation in Ukraine as of August 20th, 2025. Over the course of the day, many events have taken place, so let's get straight to the point. We are moving together with you to the Zaporizhzhia sector of the front. Russian forces continue their offensive operations and, as we discussed earlier, the attack in the Zaporizhzhia direction is now developing not from south to north, as we had assumed and analyzed a few months ago. Instead, Russian forces are advancing across this section from east to west, possibly even extending into the outer part of Dnipropetrovsk region toward the settlement of Huliaipol, more precisely toward Dobropilya, with the goal of encircling Huliaipol in a semi-ring, or perhaps even a full encirclement, forcing Ukrainian units to retreat further west toward Orikhiv. Today, updates appeared on the map specifically in this zone. Let's start with the Poltavsky direction. Today, cartographers from the pro-Ukrainian group Deep State made changes, adding several forest belts and fields in favor of Russian forces. Overall, there is noticeable activity here, as much as can be considered high dynamics in the framework of the special military operation. This is how the map looked back on August 18th, 2025. By the end of August 19th, Russian troops had managed to advance close to the settlement of Olhivska, and already on August 20th, reports appeared of their entry into the village. Based on the available data and footage, we can assume that as early as tomorrow, this settlement may fall under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. This is not the only section where Russian troops are advancing in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Today, reports also came from the area of Novoyehorivka. The Ministry of Defense confirmed the completion of its clearance. The Vostok grouping of troops released footage of objective control showing how the battles for this settlement unfolded. And of course, after numerous videos of the clearing process, FAB strikes, artillery fire, drone attacks, the final shots of this footage show two Russian soldiers raising a Russian flag in the northern part of the village. Based on these videos as well as the Ministry of Defense's report, corresponding adjustments were made to the map. In other words, we see that Russian troops, specifically the Vostok grouping, are maintaining their offensive pace. Judging by the footage published over the last 24 hours, it can be concluded that Russian forces will continue advancing towards Zaporizhzhia. It is also worth noting that high offensive tempo and intense battles remain in the area of Novoselka. Over the past week, Russian troops managed to clear Verona and earlier Yanvarske. From Novoselka, numerous videos are coming in showing regular strikes on the settlement with FABs, artillery, and Sontsepyok thermobaric systems. All of this indicates that Novoselka remains a priority target for the armed forces of the Russian Federation within the broader offensive in the Zaporizhzhia sector. We will continue watching how the situation develops, but overall, the Russian strategy is quite interesting. Instead of storming Huliaipol head-on, they are trying to bypass it from the northeast, from the north, and possibly even from the northwest in its rear. Now we move with you to the Pokrovsk agglomeration, where heavy fighting continues. Here, both sides, Russian and Ukrainian, are attacking and constantly counterattacking. The map keeps shifting back and forth. But overall, judging by the news from multiple sources over the last 24 hours, we can conclude that after the Ukrainian counteroffensive launched in the first days following the Russian breakthrough, this counteroffensive has already stalled. The Russian side is again taking the initiative. Specifically, in the settlement of Pokrovsk, some neutral cartographers marked that Ukrainian forces managed to approach closely to Troyanda and Levantivsky. This means the central part of Pokrovsk came under Ukrainian control during the counterattacks. For now, we leave these areas marked as contested until we receive more substantial confirmation. On the other hand, reports from the same sources indicate that the armed forces of the Russian Federation have fully cleared the settlement of Chunishine, located along the railway after Novokrainka and before Novopavlivka. This information was published today by neutral cartographic services. Meanwhile, Russian artillery continues to pound Novopavlivka, and along this railway line, Russian troops are gradually advancing. On the northeastern flank of the breakthrough, the most important news comes precisely from the breakthrough zone. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that Russian forces fully cleared Suketska as well as Pankivka. Regarding Suketske, we have not changed anything yet since it was marked earlier based on footage from various sources. But Pankivka was updated today in favor of Russia. Moreover, several videos of objective control were published in the area showing Ukrainian FPV drones striking Russian assault groups. So, there is ample evidence of Russian presence here, not just presence, but actual clearance of the entire sector. This is how the map looked yesterday, on August 19th. Today it looks like this. And overall, we see Russian troops actively advancing toward Volodymyrivka and Shakov. These are now the key settlements, and Russian forces are concentrating their efforts on them. Advancing further into the northwestern and western remnants of Donetsk region makes little sense and is impossible without first clearing 4 villages: Volodymyrivka, Shakov, Toretske, and Sofivka, which together form the so-called Shakov pocket. In this direction, Russian troops are attacking from the south, the west, and the east, advancing, consolidating, and expanding their zone of control. At the same time, Ukrainian forces are constantly counter-attacking, trying to approach Shakov from the north and northwest to prevent these settlements from falling. Interestingly, some pro-Western analysts have concluded that after Ukraine's failed counter-offensive, Russian forces are once again resuming their attacks. Reports are again coming in from various sources that the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the last 24 hours approached Rubizhin once more, approached Volny again, and again advanced toward Zoloty Kolodets. Thus, it is likely that tomorrow or the day after, we will again begin updating the map in favor of Russia, and all those areas that Ukrainian forces had managed to retake during their most recent counterattack will once again be marked under Russian control. I remind you, as we discussed 3 or 4 months ago, we are witnessing a decisive battle that may determine the course of future negotiations, which could begin immediately after its conclusion, or the overall trajectory of the entire special military operation, including potential deeper advances of Russian forces into Ukraine. Interestingly, we are still receiving objective control footage showing Ukrainian FPV drones and troops operating in the settlements of Novotoretske and Petrivka. In these videos, we see Ukrainian drones dropping explosives on possible Russian positions. These videos were uploaded today, but most likely they are from the archive. In other words, we continue to receive sources and fragments from battles that in fact began around 20 days ago and ended roughly 10 days ago. However, we can now see that the intensity of fighting is once again rising and picking up momentum. Next, we move with you to the settlement of Kostyantynivka, where the armed forces of the Russian Federation continue their offensive. Today, mostly pro-Russian experts made a series of sensational statements, not only experts, but also cartographers. According to their data, Russian forces have managed, one could even say fantastically, to significantly improve their positions in the southeastern part of Kostyantynivka. Reports today state that Russian troops have securely entrenched themselves in this sector. Overall, updates in this area started appearing as early as August 18th. That was when the first information emerged that Russian forces had broken through Ukrainian defenses west of Predtekin and entered the southeastern outskirts of Kostyantynivka, managing to hold ground there. This is how the map looked on August 18th. By the end of August 19th, the first notations appeared, along with reliable reports from strongly pro-Russian sources. And by the end of August 20th, we can already estimate that Russian forces control around 5% of the town. At the same time, reports indicate that due to the consolidation of Russian positions around Predtekin and their advance toward Kostyantynivka, Ukrainian forces have fully abandoned their foothold along the Siversky-Donetsk-Donbass Canal and retreated westward toward the southeastern part of the town. There is also objective control footage south of Oleksandro-Shultine, confirming the advance of Russian forces and their approach to the settlement. In general, we are observing the collapse of the Kliban-Beek pocket, the Oleksandro-Shultine pocket. In short, the entire southern and southeastern sectors of the Kostyantynivka agglomeration are crumbling, and this process appears irreversible. There is a very high probability that in the near future we will update the frontline map up to this red line. Fighting for Kostyantynivka is gaining momentum. It is difficult to say whether these battles will become high-intensity urban combat. It is also unclear whether the Russian army will fully clear the town or stop at the suburbs, as we have seen in Pokrovsk. What is clear, however, is that at this stage the Russian command does not set itself the goal of fully clearing Pokrovsk or Kostyantynivka, nor of achieving a deep breakthrough there. The main objective now is to stretch Ukrainian reserves, tie them down in heavy fighting, and exhaust them. If this is achieved, the next strike may not just be another blow, but a breakthrough across the entire front line. And such a breakthrough may not even happen here. It could be near Chernihiv, for example. During the night, Ukrainian forces attempted to transfer reinforcements through Sloviansk, but Russian reconnaissance kept close watch over the city, and temporary deployment points were regularly struck with Iskander missiles. Now we move with you to the Siversk-Lyman sector, where the situation is also developing in a maximally unfavorable way for Ukrainian forces. For a week now, the Russian army has been delivering strikes, gradually leveling the settlement of Dronivka and Ukrainian strongpoints in the area. Moreover, even pro-Ukrainian cartographers confirm that the Serebryanka forestry area has almost entirely passed under Russian control. It seems that the operation for the Russian army to cross the Siversky Donets River near Dronivka, with the aim of striking Siversk from the north, is already imminent. Meanwhile, Siversk itself is being hit regularly by Russian artillery, destroying communications equipment, antennas, and infrastructure in order to reduce the overall combat potential of the Ukrainian grouping there. At the same time, Russian units continue clearing the settlement of Zarekne. Today, very important footage from the southern part of the village was released. In this video, we see a Ukrainian tank entering the southern part of Zarekne toward Russian positions and opening fire at close range with its cannon. Buildings were damaged, but no losses are reported or visible in the footage. Still, this exact location, from which the Ukrainian tank fired on these buildings, clearly confirms the presence of Russian units in this part of the settlement. In sum, by the end of August 20th, the Russian army holds several firm footholds across Zarekne. Heavy fighting is underway, and while the battle may still be in its middle stages, we can already see where it is heading, toward the start of fighting for the town of Lyman. In the Kupiansk direction, no significant changes, but over the past 24 hours a very interesting video was published from the very central part of the settlement. In these shots, we see a Ukrainian tank firing at close range at a small building. The OSINT community has not reached a consensus on what exactly is shown in the footage. Perhaps it is archival, perhaps not. The strike may have been against saboteurs or regular troops. According to the video's author, the Ukrainian tank approached the building, offered Russian soldiers a chance to surrender, but after they refused, the tank fired at the building, effectively blasting it to pieces. That, of course, is the author's commentary. Perhaps the tank was simply clearing the line for further strikes deeper into the northeastern sector of Kupiansk. It is difficult to say. The episode took place here, and so far everyone is focusing on this point, waiting for additional confirmation. It is possible that soon the northeastern part of Kupiansk will also be marked as controlled by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. This is the first signal that something is changing on the eastern bank of the Oskil River, in the eastern part of Kupiansk. It is clear that Ukraine no longer has a continuous defensive line there. And that's all for today, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and all the best to you.